Okay, welcome. Lost Highway. This is the film that concludes Unit 2 of film class. This is the second David Lynch movie. Each unit concludes with the David Lynch movie. Unit 1 ends with Blue Velvet, Unit 2 with Lost Highway, and Unit 3 with Mulholland Drive. Lost Highway, in preparation for Lost Highway, you guys should have watched and seen the videos that I made about The Wizard of Oz, about Double Indemnity. You should have seen Wizard of Oz, Double Indemnity, and Vertigo. Why did I? And before you watch this video, obviously you should see Lost Highway. Why did I show you The Wizard of Oz and Vertigo and Double Indemnity on my way towards Lost Highway? One of the things I'm trying to look at in this course is the ways in which David Lynch, who's famously seen as a bizarre guy whose movies make no sense. It's like the classic thing to say about David Lynch is he's so weird and nothing makes any sense and don't even try to understand it, man. But if you watch old movies that David Lynch cares about, I think it helps to make sense of the crazy that he's doing. So how do you watch Double Indemnity? And by the way, it should have been a movie called Kiss Me Deadly, which is another film noir from the 40s, 50s. But Kiss Me Deadly is only available on disc. You can't rent it. It's not digital. You can't digitally download it anywhere. But Kiss Me Deadly is an amazing movie, and it is also one of the reasons I like that movie is it's very much the source of the cabin in the desert where Fred goes to. But anyway, we didn't do that one. So we did Double Indemnity. Why did I do Double Indemnity? Because Double Indemnity is the famous old Hollywood story about the sort of evil, sexy woman that lures an innocent guy into her clutches and, tries to commit crime with him and get him to do a crime, but then they turn on each other and, she's not really what she promised she would be. And also the classic kind of black and white lighting and the sort of moody, sort of spooky quality to it. So that's why I showed you Double Indemnity. The kind of classic David Lynch pays tribute to this genre quite a bit. You see it in the close-ups of the lips when she's on the phone, and there's like an extreme close-up. There's like a bar of light, and it's black here, and there's like a bar of light across her beautiful lips, and she's speaking into the telephone. It's a classic sort of staple of film noir, and she's this kind of evil blonde woman like Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity. So it's a genre I think you need to know before going into Lost Highway, because it's the main genre Lost Highway is playing with. Wizard of Oz, I'm sure having watched Lost Highway, you're like, why Wizard of Oz? Is it such an odd choice? And it doesn't seem, Wizard of Oz is a goofy kids movie, and Lost Highway is this disturbing psychosexual nightmare. But I wanted to show you Wizard of Oz because, in preparation for Lost Highway, because Wizard of Oz is, first of all, one of David Lynch's very favorite films. A lot of these movies are David Lynch's favorite films. But Wizard of Oz does something, I think, important, which is that, if you think about it, Wizard of Oz tells a story for like 20, 30 minutes about Dorothy. It's like a black and white movie about Dorothy in Kansas, and this lady is mean to her dog, and she's going to kill the dog, and she lives with Auntie M and these, farm hands that work on the farm, and a tornado comes, and like that's the story. And then she meets this kind of traveling psychic crystal ball guy wizard, and like that's the first part of the movie. And then in the movie, when we move into the second act of Wizard of Oz, Dorothy enters a totally different area. And interestingly, the sort of dreamlike world that she enters into in part 2 of Wizard of Oz, or in the second act of Wizard of Oz, I should say, the sort of dreamlike world that she enters into in Wizard of Oz is populated by people from the first part of Wizard of Oz. So the people she knew, the Kansas people, the farm hands, the neighbor, the traveling crystal ball guy, reappear in Oz, but in different roles, right? So that the farm hands become, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the lion, and right, the characters are suddenly cast in different roles, and she enters into this kind of dreamlike space. Also, Wizard of Oz, that's what happens in Lost Highway, right? Is you get a story for a little while, and then suddenly you enter into this different world, but some of the same characters appear playing different roles, which is interesting. And there's little echoes and connections back to that first section of the movie, which was quite different from after she gets to Oz. There's also, by the way, Lost Highway and Oz both feature sort of little people. Um, and there's a very and like sort of spooky supernatural stuff. So it's and complicatedly sort of fucked up father figures in the Wizard and Robert Loggia's Mr. Eddie. So I wanted you to see Wizard of Oz for that reason, because it's a story told twice. You get a story in one world, and then you enter into a dreamlike world where bits from the first world show up in recast in interesting, confusing ways. And that's what happens in Lost Highway. I also wanted to show you Vertigo, because Vertigo is key to what is happening in Lost Highway, because they seem quite different, but they're not. Both Vertigo and Lost Highway are about a guy who falls in love with a woman who has one color hair, and then he loses her, and then he finds her again with different color hair, and it doesn't go good that time either. In fact, I would argue, and this is, I know, a strange thing to say, but in an odd way, Lost Highway is almost a remake of Vertigo. It's a strange kind of remake. It's not very similar to the original, but the elements, he's playing the same game that Vertigo is playing. He's changed it dramatically, so dramatically that most people wouldn't even think of Vertigo when they see Lost Highway. But it's there, and it's virtually a remake. And you see that same relationship where Blue Velvet is practically a remake of Rear Window, even though it's quite different and quite strange and very odd, and most people wouldn't even think of Rear Window. But there's so many, when you notice it, there's so many similarities between Rear Window and Blue Velvet. Similar here for Lost Highway. There's just parallels between Vertigo and Lost Highway. And so that is why I showed you these sort of three films on the way towards thinking about Lost Highway. So thank you for joining me for the Lost Highway video lecture series thing. And also, I'm wearing a Smashing Pumpkins t-shirt because Smashing Pumpkins features prominently in the soundtrack of Lost Highway. Okay, so let's talk about Lost Highway. The first thing you're going to notice about Lost Highway is it is slow. The first 30 minutes in particular they're slow. The correct way to watch Lost Highway, by the way, is you have to kind of I don't know how to put this. You have to find how slow it is funny. Like, it's so slow, you should be laughing a little bit. The actors, David Lynch said, speak the lines slowly. And the actors said them slowly. And then David Lynch said, no, slower than that. And it's comically, it takes so long to answer like simple questions like, are you going out? No. What are you going to do? Read. Read, like, oh my god, like it's so ridiculously slow. But I would argue that that slowness very much comes out of 2001. He does the same thing that Stanley Kubrick does in 2001, which is that he goes extremely slow so that you get used to a very slow pace. When you get to the last half hour of the movie, just like when you get to the last half hour of 2001, suddenly so many things are happening so quickly. So you're like, Jesus, speed up, speed up. This is so boring. And then when you get to the last 30 minutes, you're like, oh God, slow down, slow down, slow down. And then the movie's over. It's what the last 30 minutes of Lost Highway and the last 30 minutes of 2001 are shocking and feel bonkers for the same reason, because you've gotten used to an absurdly slow pace, and then he slams you with all the crazy stuff. You feel how bonkers the final 30 minutes of those movies are because of the slow pace they took. And again, I know 2001 and Lost Highway don't seem very similar, but they are. Because the other thing that 2001 and Lost Highway have in common is you watch a story with a group of characters, and then you like don't see those characters anymore. Suddenly, it's like a different story in a different place, and it's your job to think about. He's not going to tell you. It's your job to think about what is the relationship between the characters in this section of the movie and the characters in the first section of the movie, right? What's the relationship between the monkeys and the astronauts? What's the relationship between Fred and Pete? right? You have to kind of think about it. And he leaves it up to you. Like, you're smart, you'll figure it out, you deal with it. So we're going to deal with it today. So let's go through Lost Highway. I'll see you in the next video.